Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack for Business podcast. Over 350 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game.
From the audience perspective, how can you build a business culture where people feel valued, stay longer, and perform better? That's exactly what our guest, Lalith, will talk about today. He'll share how mindful leadership and appreciative culture can transform your team dynamics, boost retention, and align your business with deeper values. Our guest today is from Sage, Ontario. Lalith is a global entrepreneur and educator with a passion for mindfulness-based leadership. With business ventures and partnerships stretching across Asia, Europe, Africa, and North America, he began his journey co-founding a solar energy company in Sri Lanka in the 1980s, using Canadian technology long before green energy went mainstream. After selling that company in 1999, he worked with major organizations like the World Bank, United Nations, to bring renewable energy to rural communities in developing countries. Since moving to Canada in 2011, Lalith has focused on leadership rooted in mindfulness through his work at Sage, Ontario. He speaks and writes widely on ethical business, spirituality, and renewable energy, plus global social issues. Lalith holds diplomas in mechanical engineering technology and marketing and a master's degree in responsibility and business practice from the University of Bath in the UK. You may recognize him also from seasons 2 and 3 in this Knack for Business podcast. It is an absolute pleasure having you back on the podcast. Welcome, sir. What would you like to share with us?
Times are such that I really like Martin Luther King's quote of when he said, "You need to talk about things that matter." And I think we are here talking about things that matter today.
Very good. So we hear a lot about culture. You couldn't have grown everything from either you're going to create a culture medium or you're growing some bacteria to us people and how we interact with each other. And it's always been around us. We've recognized it. What is the differentiator, though, between culture and then appreciative culture?
Great question. First of all, Bernie and Wayne, thank you for inviting me back. So that's really a pleasure to be with you today. I enjoyed the last 2 sessions and look forward to having a wonderful conversation about this important topic about culture. Yes, appreciative culture requires an organization to be purposeful. So that's one of the prerequisites. So I go back to the foundations of when we establish a company. Often what happens is we get so caught up in setting up the business and getting the transactional part of that business done that we forget about the relationship part. So whether it's a small business, a medium size, whatever it is, forgetting that can create a problem later on. One of the things that I'm a great proponent of is anchoring an organization on a set of values. I remember when we started our solar company back in 1986, we were 27-year-olds who just wanted to get on with the business. We had some wonderful mentors who talked about the importance of grounding the organization on a set of values and creating a leadership culture based on those values. You're already starting off on the right foot of appreciating people. Creating an appreciating culture starts by appreciating yourself and being compassionate and good to yourself first, and then extending that to the community out there. So when, this whole exercise of visioning and mission and purpose, all of these things seem to me frivolous at the time. But I have learned the importance of spending time up front to ground the organization on a vision, mission, purpose, and a set of values that then enables the creation of an appreciative culture. So appreciative culture means we appreciate that we have an opportunity to do business with clients, resources, and most of all, people in the organization and all other stakeholders. Anchoring ourselves on a set of values, and those basic values of respect and integrity are foundational to creating an appreciative culture.
So if you're starting out, I'm making widgets. I'm all inspired. I'm going to make widgets and I might hire a contractor to support me and then eventually staff. Your focus is so heavily on the objective of getting that product out the door or service, whatever the case might be. To have that culture embedded in there, to have that structured so that you build it right, like laying the foundations properly. If you're 20 something, or even if you're 50 something, you'd leave in the corporate universe. You might have had some training on culture, et cetera. You know what you don't like, or you do know what you like, but you're 20 something. How do you find that? You know what? We're making a recipe for cake today, not soup. So, don't get me onions for the cake. Maybe you can have an onion cake. Who knows? But how do you find that right recipe?
I really believe that it's about stepping back, constantly being able to reflect on why we are doing what we are doing. Often we don't have the time or the resources to do that because we are pushed to the limit trying to get the product to the market. If it's a new business, developing the market is very important. But it is also important to always step back and be able to, on a daily basis, reflect and look at, okay, what's going on? How are we doing? What are we doing? Why are we doing what we are doing? Those are the important questions we need to ask ourselves daily as an organizational leader. I call that sacred time. And that is also rooted for me on a mindfulness practice. So when one has a mindfulness practice, I really believe that every business leader has to have a daily mindfulness reflective practice, because that's the sacred times you get to shut everything off and just say, okay, how are we doing today? I propose to have a mindfulness meditation practice in the morning, but also during the course of the day. What I also propose is to have that pause during the, say, in the afternoon, where things are a little slower, your mind is going a little slower, but take that pause even for 10, 15 minutes and take that sacred time to reflect on what's going on. How are we doing? And so why am I doing? The purpose of what I'm doing being reinforced. What am I doing and how am I doing it? And how is the organization doing it? That's that time for reflection that enables us to say, okay, you know what? I need to change that. You might even create spaces for conversations. So that way we are not sort of racing ahead on a transactional level, getting things done, but we are also pausing to reflect. For me, that's where the mindfulness practice becomes important, because that's what restrains us. That's what holds us back. And I want to bring to our listeners' notice this book. Have you heard of this guy?
Mark Carney?
I picked up this book way before he became famous in Canada. I admired him for the way he led the Bank of Canada during the 2008 crisis. I wasn't in Canada at the time, I was in Sri Lanka, but Canada was one of the shining lights as a country which didn't really was able to take control of the situation, didn't have any bank runs, managed the economy well. So I admired this guy, Mark Carney. And then I also realized that he was the head of Bank of England in 2011. So when this book came up for sales, I love this word values. For me, values is what really grounds us in doing the right thing for the right reasons. In this book, Mark Carney says, and I picked up this book before he became famous. I'm right now towards the end of the book, and it's a fascinating read in terms of also unpacking the kind of the deeper layers of what happened during the crisis and how greed was one of the reasons for the crisis in 2008. Corporate greed continues to create problems for us in terms of our sustainability, social responsibility, and environmental responsibilities. It is very human to be greedy. It is also a depraved trait that all of us humans have when we act on fear, when we are mindless. When we become mindful, we become aware of our greed. And it's delusional to be greedy because it has a negative impact all around us. I love one of the things that he says. He says, this is in page 373 in his chapter called Values Based Leadership. He says, the third essential quality of leadership is clarity. Clarity starts with the clarity of mind and sound judgment that arise from emotional awareness and control. A good leader is contemplative, meaning they can be present in the moment and find meaning in experience. Like many others, I have found the practice of meditation and a daily examine to be effective disciplines for a more contemplative approach to life and leadership. I find them effective when I practice them and I notice their absence once errors and misunderstandings pile up after I determine that I'm too busy. Leadership always has an element of power, even when it is grounded solely in the powers of persuasion. But the quest for power quickly becomes dangerous if it is divorced from the moral authority that effective leaders require. Leaders need to renounce power for its own sake and discern the power of service. The daily practice of meditation is a simple way to realize this paradox, letting go of power in order to use it in the service of others. I love that two paragraphs he's written in this important book for us. And he is a person who has walked that talk. In creating an appreciative culture, he talks about that even within the Banks of England with his team members, how he created an appreciative culture to solve these predicaments that the world got itself into in the economic crisis, for instance, in 2008. He says that he could never have done it by himself. He had a wonderful team who rose to the occasion, took a lot of risk, was creative and innovative, took hard decisions that were needed to be taken. And so that's the other part of creating an appreciative culture. So it's not all being nice, but it's being assertive, it's doing the right thing, using the power for the right reasons. Everything is dynamic. Nothing's permanent and nothing is perfect, but finding that yin and yang balance, and I call it the power of balance, and always checking yourself as the head of the organization, as a leader, to see that, am I overstepping my bounds? I'm bound to overstep my bounds because I'm only human, right? Fears get the better of me too, because I'm responsible for an organization. I'm responsible for producing a product that's of quality for the customers or a service for the customers. I'm responsible for the livelihoods of so many people that are employed in the organization. So you carry a huge burden. I lost all my hair running that solar business with my two partners. When we had 60 employees, every month we had to pay the salaries in a country that was so unstable with insurgencies and war. But I knew that being grounded in our values helped us to overcome a lot of those challenges because we did the right thing at the end of the day. There was one month where we were not able to pay the salaries. Not one person got out there and picketed outside our factory because we were transparent with them from the beginning, saying, people, we're going through a tough time here. We are renegotiating a loan with the bank and the market has taken a dive and these are the reasons, and because of the violence in the country. They understood. We looked after the most needy, but we also gave up our salaries in that time to make sure that our people don't get compromised. So those are practical ways of creating that appreciative culture, because it's reciprocal too, right? It comes back in the way people work with you in the organization.
A lot of the people I hang with aren't SMEs, small and medium enterprises. Tell me about the solopreneur who wants to daily create an experience that is going to live him a better workplace, how is he going to communicate what he wants to be to not only his eventual employees, but his clients?
Good question, Wayne. I again point the mirror at myself. How do I put a mirror on myself to see how I am doing? Take that temperature first. If I am in a place of fear, anxiety, frustration, anger, I'm not going to be able to do my best. Even my family members won't want to see me. When you show up at the breakfast table, they're all going to disappear, right? So when you show up at work and these poor people cannot disappear, they got to put up with you. So first thing is managing your emotion. So that is where, once again, the mindfulness practice is about restraint. It restrains you wanting to indulge in your anger and frustration and scream at everybody else. But to manage that within us, if the market is a tough place, we're not able to get, maybe even in terms of production, we're not able to get to the level of quality that you like, and the clients are rejecting your service or the product, and you're feeling frustrated with your team members. If you're going to dump on them, you're going to create anxiety within the organization. You're going to create low morale. You're going to create a disconnect where people are going to be even scared to talk to you. This is the time where you have to create, and this is the time where you have to be very, very careful. Because if you create a disconnect, people are going to be scared to talk to you. This is the time where you have to create, and this is the time where you have to be very, very careful. Because if you create a disconnect, people are going to be even scared to talk to you. a safe space for people to come to you and speak to you and give you solutions, because you don't have all the answers. People in the front lines do. So how do we create that atmosphere? That is where I pay a lot of attention to the other word, power. How do I use my power? As the owner of the business, I have a tremendous amount of power. I can use it from my position. I have the power to get rid of people. I have the power not to give people promotions. Power is a position that your team members are going to be at some level afraid of, because they can be let go or screamed at. So this is where self-restraint becomes important. Rather than indulge in my power, how do I assume it in a way where I can then use it in a way by getting out there with my personal power. There's a difference between using your positional power and your personal power. It's also related to whether you're managing or leading. Managing is using your positional power, micromanaging, telling people what to do and taking their power away. So they just become minions, cogs in the wheel. And all of that then becomes your 100% responsible for it. They're not going to rise to the occasion to take any risk because you have assumed all that power yourself. The way I love to operate is to hand over the power to the team and distribute that power. And that is coming from a place of personal power. So that's where the values will anchor us. If I really firmly believe that I'm going to be respectful given any situation, I'm going to hold myself back even if I want to scream at somebody who has made a big mistake. I'm going to think about how I'm going to respond to this situation. But yes, hold that person to account. And language becomes so important here. If I can say, you're so stupid, what's wrong with you? Those are the kinds of words that you go back to your childhood sometimes, right? These are the kinds of words you may have heard as a 5-year-old, right? Or a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, something. And as an adult, when you hear that, again, you go into that place of fear, frustration, and anger and lose sight of what you need to do to solve this problem. Because now you're trying to protect yourself, protect your ego, your reputation, because you've been insulted. So this is where the responsibility on the person who has that power is tremendous in the way you communicate. Yes, something has gone wrong. I even practice by not saying you have done something wrong. I like to create situations where I said, this is a major screw up. Things have gone wrong. How do we solve this? So these people don't have to defend themselves. So they can then come forward and say, okay, yes, they will even then. I have seen occasions where they say, no, I take responsibility, because they feel safe to take that responsibility. Because I'm not judging them. I'm not calling them stupid or anything like that. I'm not demeaning them in any way. Mistakes can happen. How do we learn from those mistakes and grow? Right. So that's the approach we need to take. Even if there's a temporary loss of profits or even a client, what do we learn from that? Because that employee or that group of employees, the team members are going to be there with you forever. Imagine the cost of replacing one person who's already got experience. And I love the story of the CEO, the chairperson of IBM at a time. I'm sure many of you have heard this, when somebody was given $1 million in the 60s. I think it was Mr. Watson, to come up with this product. He spent the $1 million and failed. So he basically wrote the resignation letter and went to Mr. Watson and said, Mr. Watson, I wasted $1 million of good money for IBM. I'm handing in my resignation. Mr. Watson took that resignation, ripped it to pieces, and threw it in the garbage and said, I invested $1 million in you. Think I'm going to waste that? And you go somewhere else and use that? You stay here and keep going. So that's amazing leadership, right? You can be impetuous and petulant and angry and all of that. And he had every right to do that, right? But he didn't. He was much bigger than that. So that's the kind of leadership that we need to really work hard at. And it is absolutely daily practice, and it is hard. It is one of the most difficult things to do, to be an organizational leader and head.
You've covered a lot about the owner. Let's flip it over to the staff or contractual staff you might have. How do you get them to buy in? Some people might refer to, I don't know if I want to drink the Kool-Aid. And even though the Kool-Aid's not harmful, how do you get them to swing into it. And if they resist, you do the Borg statement, resistance is futile. Or do you help them, go, you know what? Perhaps this is not the space for you. How do you have that conversation? And I understand you have the power, as you were talking about earlier. You also have the responsibility. At the end of the day, that's where the buck stops, right? Who's the person ultimately responsible? How do you get that person or the staff to respond or engage? Or do you adapt and engage? What's that mix look like?
There has to be some acceptance of the fact that there's a bell curve in any organization. If you have 10 people, there's going to be one person at either end who's an amazing performer. There's going to be one person on the other side who's not meeting the standards. And that's a law of averages, right? And then the other people are distributed on that bell curve from great to not so good. As a leader, as a manager, my focus is to reinforce the high performers by encouraging them, but also paying attention to the not so good performers. I like to do it as a manager. That's why I really encourage managers to have a daily, rather a monthly accounting for yourself. If I have 5 or 6 people reporting to me, I do a small table and I write their names. Then I have 2 columns. The first column is skill and competence, right? It's hardcore. It's fairly easy to measure. And the next column is their attitude, is their commitment, which is great, which can be a moving target too. So on a monthly basis, I give them a mark out of 5 for each column. So these are the kinds of things you need to do in that sacred time you spend on a daily basis, right? Because you need to put your feet up and just say, okay, how is this person doing? What's going on with that person? I'm not feeling good about the way they're performing. There's something going on. If I say, given Paul 4 on the skill side, and suddenly I'm finding myself giving Paul 2 on the attitude and commitment side, and I'm seeing that something's going on, attention to detail, the quality of the output, things are coming down. When I look at Paul, I'm also seeing him kind of walking around with his shoulders down. That's time for me to now pay attention to that individual. So then you take on the coaching and mentoring role. Now you're not a manager anymore. You're going to pull that person in and say, listen, I'm noticing something. Is there anything that's going on? You have the competence, but the last few times you're dropping the ball and things are happening. You're coming late to work. What's happening? You may even find out that a child is sick, mother is sick, or whatever it is that's going on in their lives that you need to now compensate for. It's so important for you as a leader, as a manager, to be in touch with each and every one of the people who are going to be directly reporting to you. And that's something that then enables you to also do what's needed. If their skill level was, say, you're giving them a 3 and now they're not able to do what's being asked for in terms of their skill, what can you do about that? Can you put them through some training, more supervision for now? So there's a two-way responsibility that falls on the owner or manager of the team to understand each and every person at a very intimate level. And sometimes people say, yeah, I don't want to get involved in their family stuff and all. No, you have no choice. You're going to bring your family stuff into the workplace. There's no demarcation and say, I'm going to leave my emotions behind at the door if I'm upset about my child being sick, right? It's going to affect your work. So as a manager, as a leader, if I know that person's child is sick, you're not encroaching on their private life. You're understanding what's going on, and then you can take measures. You can even tell the person, look, take off for a day and sort this out and come back. You're not good here. You're not good for the family. Let's do that. So that's the kind of, so when you're creating an appreciative culture, your team members will also appreciate that you will honor them, right? So you're not being transactional, you're being relationship oriented.
You touched on a lot of different points. And I guess the follow-up to that would be on a one-to-one cross-connect, right? What happens when all of a sudden you're starting to scale up when you're 1 to 5 crew to 1 to 100 crew? Like, what's the sweet spot where you're going, okay, I now need someone else to manage this So that person's going to report to me, but now you're one step further away from the rest of the crew. And how do you make sure that culture then transits across? Hopefully at 100%, right? And it never does, as things change, the circumstances influence the results. But how do you try to maximize that so it always stays true?
We know that our span of control is about 12 people, right? Beyond that, we lose control. Ideally, it should be between 8 and 10. When I say control, it's to be able to manage the teams. When the group is expanding, that transitional space is one of the most challenging times because, if you're going from 10 to say 15, 20, now you're starting to lose control. You need to really now look at somebody who's going to become a supervisor in that process as it grows. You need to really pay attention from a human resource point of view. What are the competencies required as the organization grows? What positions need to be put in? Is it now creating a need for divisions, units, business units? When you do that, you're really paying attention. This is not something you can do alone. You need support because it's really lonely at the top. You need to have some strategic advisors. You need to have a trusted confidant as the organization grows. These are things that are ignored by most business leaders because they are powering through this growth phase and they're doing it also not with full understanding of that aspect of the human resources component. It may be an engineer owner growing the business, seeing the need to increase capacity in these areas. But if you do it without a plan, without a process, without understanding where you're going, this is where one needs to again go back to why am I doing this business? What am I doing? How am I doing it? The purpose of why I'm doing what I'm doing. When I keep revisiting that, when I find that sacred time to keep revisiting, I have to create that safe space to say, okay, I need to now bring somebody else in to support me here as the organization grows. You're also having sounding boards, others who are going to tell you, hey, that's not a good idea. Or if you're hiring somebody new and you need to fill a position fast, sometimes you just don't have the time to interview 15, 20 people. The first or second person that comes along, you're going to jump and grab that person. That's the wrong way to go about it. Because once you hire, it's so difficult to get that person out. So you need to pay attention to as the organization grows in the hiring practice. Under the purpose has to be the objective and a strategic plan as we are growing forward. Bernie, you and I are involved in a business where we have got caught out without having that because of market forces, because of circumstances change. So we know the situation that we are in as a result of not having the luxury, even at a fundamental level, when the market changed, we have made commitments and now we are really handicapped in the way we are trying to keep that business going. I've also been involved in businesses where we've taken the time and used outside help to help myself and the team members to, as the business grew. Samantha, my wife, and I, we were involved in a inbound tour business. And as it was starting to grow, we had constant conversations because she didn't want to leave the home. So we operated out of I made an office from our garage. This was back in Sri Lanka. And as the business grew, she said, no, I'm not going to leave the home. So if we're going to grow, we're going to get another office, but we're going to get a manager to run that office. And this is the way we are going to do it. We never lost sight of the purpose of the business to really serve high-end clients who are coming into Sri Lanka. That purpose meant that we had to pay attention to detail because these were people who were paying a lot of money to come to Sri Lanka in the middle of a war. And there were so many moving parts that we had to provide them an incredibly high level of service. There were very competent partners in the business who had domain knowledge and awareness, who really were the pillar for the business to move forward. But all of that meant that we had to constantly keep reviewing ourselves as the business was slowly growing. I think I probably went outside with this example in terms of your question of how do we deal with team members.
Being 60 plus, is a lot of us are passionately wanted to start something, and we have the endorphins and we had those early successes and we're pretty excited and we really believe then over, let's say, a decade, we become automatons. We lose our zeal. How do we either get back that purpose or know that we're actually holding it back and choose somewhere else?
Oh, so you're talking about age of 60 something?
Just because the
Well,
person has
yeah,
been at it a while.
right. Yes. Well, there are a couple of things that are at play. As we age, our cognitive functions, our physical functions, all of that slow down. So there's a natural process of aging that takes that and the potential for enthusiasm and the ability to perhaps withstand some shocks become diminished. So this is where I am a great proponent of mind body practices. I'm a great proponent of breathing well. I'm 66 now, so I still like to keep my mind body system going sharp as it can be because I'm self-employed. I have no financial freedom. So as a self-employed entrepreneur, I have to keep my mind agile and alert. One of the things I'm a great proponent of is physical exercise, even as we age. I do pull ups, I do a lot of stretching and keep my muscle mass going. And another thing is, as we get older, the muscles get softer, but our body is kept up by the muscle mass. So keeping that muscle mass going. Not only that, our physical agility helps our brain agility too, because brain is a muscle too, right? Now the weather is getting warmer. I get out there and I do quick starts and sprints. I do jump ups and various things that help me be springy because that's having a direct impact on the agility of my brain. And as a result, my cognitive processes, thought processes, and understanding what's going on around me. I'm a real proponent of that. As business owners, business leaders, really spending a good amount of time on a daily basis. And it's got to be a daily practice. Go for a walk, go for exercise, whatever it is to keep that mind and body in tip top shape. By doing that, you are able to deal with the situations that arise, Wayne. You can ask me a further question on that so I can hone in on it.
Okay. You talk about keeping your body agile, physically fit, because it helps improve the mind, which then improves the overall result. It provides stabilization, keeps you calm. Perhaps exercise becomes the meditation piece, right? Do the reflection. See, you're working through something while your body's doing a workout and so forth. We've touched on the self, the people around you, and the business. How do you find the balance so you stay profitable? Because if you're not profitable, you're either a charity or a non-for-profit, which means you're getting your tax breaks, right? But there are businesses too, or you're a social enterprise, or you are a business. But at the end of the day, you have to have revenues coming in so that you can, it's basically the water of life for the business. How do you make sure there's enough water of life for the business, but at the same time, being balanced? This goes back to the earlier part when we were talking about 2008 in the great, and I get that piece. It's, blind ambition. There's a saying, the ends justify the means, right? And, damn the torpedoes. Well, cutting the nose despite the face, and we see people do that all the time. How do you not cut off your nose?
I think in the current society, the way our economy has now been evolving, it's come to a place of take no prisoner approach because there's really very little give as a result of a transformation from being a market economy to a market society where everything is transactional now. Everything has a price that has been attached to it. So I think we're facing some really tough times. And I talked about Martin Luther King saying about we need to talk about things that matter. And this is something that we need to really think of at a fundamental level of the neoliberal economic society we have created. So it's a much larger conversation because everybody's on survival mode now as a result of it. Everybody's pushed to the limit. And when fear is the driver, all the bad behaviors show up. I have to really work hard every day to get that emotion of fear. Oh gosh, look, another day listening to the news or what's going on in the economy because I have commitments to meet at the end of the month. When we had 60 employees, that fear is 60 times as much. So then you tend to overstep your bounds and move towards greed because this month I got to make a killing because I don't know what the next month's going to be like. We have to also think about what has created our society to become so transactional. Everything has a value of money rather than a value of a relationship. I get often asked by friends who need some help, who are CEOs or heads of organizations. They call me and say, "Hey, man, can I have a coffee with you?" And we chat. I give my time and advice. At the end of the day, they say, "Okay, send me an invoice." I say, "Oh, man, I'm not going to send you an invoice. We have a friendship relationship. You call me because you needed some help." People are surprised at that. And that's why I want to continue that practice of no. We need to be able to give up our time when people are in need. If it's an institution, an organization, I'm happy to take the money from that. So how do we find that balance? Even though I need money to pay the rent at the end of the month, how can I be brave enough to say no? I'm drawing the line there. This is a much larger question. That's why having conversations with younger people is important because we're going to hit a wall at some point. The corporate greed that's out there, the poisoning of this earth, the kind of violence that's being meted out, and the kinds of industries that are ruling the world. Some of those industries are bigger than nations' economies. So these are huge issues that we need to talk about and feel safe to talk about. Because if we don't, Mother Earth is going to get angry at us. That's part of the reason why I'm reading Mark Carney's book. He spends a lot of time on the environmental, social, and governance aspects of business, because that at the end of the day is what will temper us from going for the kill. Right? Does that kind of address it? It's a whole podcast on its own, I believe.
Absolutely. Opening a can of worms here, so to speak.
So if you have this sense in your mind, you want to learn what training you offer and how to get a hold of you, how do we do that?
I have a LinkedIn page. If you Google my name, I show up. My email address is lalith@mindfulsage.net. I'm fairly quick to respond. If anybody wants to speak to me, I'd love to have conversations. One of the things that I still do, and I've started again, is I meet one new person every day for a conversation. Bernie especially is a master at meeting one new person a day every day. And so, so that way I'm also able to learn from others too, in terms of what their needs are, what their hopes are, and what their pain points are in their lives, in whatever they're doing. Most people I meet are entrepreneurs, business people, and heads of organizations too.
You know what? I want to say thank you, Lalith, Wayne, and you, the Knack for Business listeners, because this is a enlightening conversation. It tells you there's ways to approach your appreciative culture in your space. Reach out to Lalith. He's witnessed the change in renewable energy in rural communities, the impact that's had there. And a true change begins with how we lead. And Lalith can help guide you on that path. He's a very calm soul and a good conversationalist, as you can tell from the podcast.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVINSIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter u.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people: Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert; Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host; Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space; then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner; and Wayne Pratt from Motive 8U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer: please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.